There's, I see you.
Hi, Aaron.
Hopped on too to make sure that.
Hello. Sorry
Hi.
about that.
Sorry about that.
This is why we have a tech check. Do we want to introduce, do a little bit of run a show?
Let's run through the tech. Let's make sure Günther can share his screen. Let's make sure that we can mute everybody except for him, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, can you give me the, what is it called, the host?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to do that. For some reason, the option isn't available. It's grayed out.
Is Camus the host already?
Aaron is right now, but the idea is that you can give someone else the host privilege.
Shoot.
Hi, Günther.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, I'm not sure. I don't know why it's not letting me change the host.
Does anyone know who John PR is?
No.
That name was here when I first signed into the meeting, and it said connecting to audio the whole time.
It says that for me too. Okay, well, Camus, I might have to just host.
Yeah, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can share a screen though, right?
I can, yes. So the scissor reel will be, I will do it. Well.
And I'll just control like muting everybody, making sure that, you know, mostly making sure that everybody's muted, and also the chat room. And like putting those links into the chat room.
Right. I just wonder, I just wonder if people will see my screen if I'm just one of the participants.
Give it a shot.
Should. Try it.
Share screen. Yep.
Oh, shoot. Okay, I have to quit, log out, and log back in. Okay. In order to do the share screen. Okay.
What about Günther said that his share screen was not available?
I just a few minutes ago made it available to everyone. So can you check right now, Günther?
Yeah, I was kicked out for 2 minutes, but then I restarted everything and then it worked. So.
And is there a share screen option at the bottom of your screen?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Good. Then you should be good to go.
Well, let's go ahead and try that and just make sure that we see something.
Okay, so I share the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Aha. Beautiful.
Great.
Okay. So it works.
Perfect.
Okay, that's all that really matters.
Yeah.
Now we can hear you and we can see what you're talking about.
Okay, okay, perfect.
By the way, thank you so much, Günther, for joining us. I think it's late at night for you, isn't it?
Late at night for me. 10 in the evening, but that's normal. That's not a problem. For you, it's lunchtime, no?
That's right.
I had an intensive day with my students, but I think it's okay.
Camus, can you share your screen?
There it is.
I think we're in business.
You're muted, by the way, Camus.
Does it look big or is it small on your screens?
It's big, but we can see like all your open windows.
Okay. What I will be doing is this guy on full screen.
Aaron, when you can you mute everybody and then unmute individuals, or how does that work?
Yeah.
And do you control the access of people coming in or not?
People don't need, there's no waiting room the way this
Okay.
is set up. So people are just joining right now.
How's my screen?
It looks great.
Good.
It's not full width on my laptop, but
Yeah, it's not the right aspect ratio.
I shouldn't stretch it, right?
No,
It looks great the way that it is.
it's fine.
And then I'm gonna switch over and show this. Recess event.
You can show it, but you also can just talk about it if you want and direct them there.
Okay.
Either is fine with me. I don't know if Aaron has a different opinion.
Yeah,
No.
you can just mention it. You can show them, or you could just mention it while the sizzle reel is going, or like in your opening remarks. And I'm going to go get that link right now so that I can put it in the chat room. That way you can say the link is in the chat.
Günther, I've been managing the social media pages, and I've gotten a lot of messages and comments about your work. So I think everybody is going to be really excited today.
Okay, okay, we'll see. It's a bit, I mean, 40 minutes is not very long. So
No.
I had to reduce all my slides. My assistants told me I had more than 200 slides. I reduced it to 60, so I cannot talk about everything. So, but perhaps in the end, we will have Q&A, and so.
Yeah, I mean, maybe too, we can hang on for longer than an hour, maybe too, for people that don't have to get back to work or.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, if the Q&A is going well, we don't have to cut it off.
So Garrett, I was not able to find the care package photos.
Oh, I sent you a link or the location on the network by email.
Via email?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I will.
It's a location on the MCG network. So.
Okay. I will try to do that maybe in like 5 minutes. I'll move to my other computer. Is this moving forward? sorry, it's not on. Do you want to quickly go over the run of show with Günther, that kind of stuff?
He has the outline, or should have, that I sent to Thomas, I believe.
Okay.
We'll do an introduction. You'll do your announcements, and I'll introduce Günther, and then he'll have the floor until the Q&A.
Anything we should talk about? Any questions before we start?
I don't have anything. Unless, Günther, do you have the photos that we sent of the care package that's on its way?
Yeah. Yes, I have it. Yes.
Oh, okay. So, oh, Camus left.
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, you are. Okay. So he could also share that if it's convenient. We just wanted to look at the things we sent with you for a minute and just talk about that before you start your presentation.
Typical Anglo-Saxon. You have gold, silver, and bronze prizes. Oh God.
It's very Olympic.
Yes, definitely. Even copper. You have even copper.
I found it. I think I can pull it up.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I just got buried with emails yesterday night.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me do some little bit of background work in the real quick.
Okay. Well, we can see all of your stuff.
Nothing that provocative on my computer.
Camus, I just figured out how to make you host.
Oh, great.
Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, I think that would be.
Okay, I just did it.
Oh, now my outbox isn't working. Oh, maybe it is. That's so strange.
Maybe you should not share your screen until you're ready.
Oh. Yeah. Oh yeah, everyone's on.
So Günther, you said that you can't travel right now outside of Switzerland. And when we were in Basel a few years ago, and we took a streetcar to the Vitra campus, which was technically crossing the border. And
Yes.
all of that would be shut now, even that kind of.
No, not really. Illegally, we are doing it. We have a summer school with Vitra. So between France and Switzerland and Germany, we are traveling, but it's completely illegal in terms of the regulation of the university, but we do it completely illegal. But I know, I mean, we can't work like that. No, all seminar weeks, everything is related to Switzerland, but it's very difficult. So
yeah.
we don't respect all these rules. You should have a single room for every student in a hotel. I mean, can you imagine how expensive it is? And so we do a bit, but that's typical Switzerland. You can do illegal things, not talking about it, and then you can do it. So especially with Vitra, we are doing this workshop. We are doing it every summer school, and I mean, as you describe it, from Basel, you can take a tramway, and you are in the Vitra campus. It's part of Switzerland as well, and so it's a bit
more
tricky,
fluid,
but we do it. We just do it. Sure. And the students accept it, say no, it's a bit illegal, but it's a bit difficult. So it's we have quite a lot of Corona people in Switzerland, but all related to the young generation. We don't have it in the hospitals. Meanwhile, people are not in the hospital anymore because these are all young people, and so are not. But we will see how it works in the future.
So all the students are in person now, back to class in person.
Yeah, with a distance and with a mask and everything, but we are saying there is a bubble. So we have students, 20 students together. It's a bubble. And then we can deal in an analog way. But the problem is if one of these students have a corona infection, we have to go into quarantine for 2 weeks, and then it's changing to digital teaching, and it's very difficult, I have to say. I think it's similar to your situation.
Yeah, that sounds like it. In Anchorage, the schools are currently all online.
Yeah.
No in-person school yet.
Yeah.
On the public schools.
Yeah.
So.
For me, it's very strange. The last semester was completely digital, and it was really difficult. I mean, to teach architecture or landscape architecture completely digital, it's impossible. It's just impossible. Especially we have the students just beginning now in the first semester. It's just impossible. You cannot talk about architecture or landscape just in a digital way. You need real situations in cities, in landscape, and so that's really a problem, especially in the first semester.
Absolutely, yeah. We need that connection to place to even think about design.
And we meanwhile have students saying, we stop our study, we will wait for a year or 2 years because it's impossible to study like that. And so we have less students, and I think it's really good. I can understand it. It's really good that they stop it and say, okay, let's wait until it's coming analog as well. And I would expect next year we will have a different situation.
Well, welcome everybody. I think I'll get us started because we're at the top of the hour, a little past. Camu's going to run the slides here for a minute, and I'll go ahead and cover a little housekeeping. This is, I'm Garrett Bertner. I'm a recent past board member of the Alaska Design Forum and an architect in Anchorage, Alaska. Everybody is joining by Zoom. This is the continuation of the Design Forum's Revised Utopias speaker series 2020. And we have Günther Vogt here today, joining us from nighttime in Zurich. During the presentation, we'll keep everybody muted. You will have the ability to use the chat, which it looks like folks are already discovering there. So go ahead and chat conversations, share ideas, thoughts as it goes. We're gonna have about 40 minutes for Günther's presentation, and then we'll reserve some time at the end for question and answer. And while we're trying to keep it to an hour, if we need to go a little past, that's fine as well, if everybody's excited about the conversation there. So I'm going to turn it over to Camus for a minute with a few announcements from the Design Forum.
Thanks, Garrett. Yeah, I see some videos and familiar faces, and this is so great during these COVID times. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for lunch in Anchorage. I also know that several people are from out of state, so this is quite an international conversation, which should be pretty interesting. I just kind of want to quickly go through some fall programming that we have in the works. COVID did throw a kind of curveball, and we have pivoted. So I'm really proud to say that we are continuing programming, and we're continuing these discussions with internationals as well as locally. We'll have today Günther Vogt. He's a landscape architect out of Switzerland. In October, we'll have Bill Poster, who's an activist artist out of the UK. Michael Ford will join us in November. He's kind of a, he's trained as an architect, but he is definitely an advocate in advancing equity in the design profession. And then Chris Drury will join us in December. He's a land artist, and he does work all over the world, huge scales, really nice work. Of course, we want to have these speakers in Alaska, but they have agreed to join us digitally. And so they're in all different time zones, but they're willing to kind of share their story. So I think we're really fortunate. We're also going to be collaborating with the Anchorage Museum for Design Week in October, and we'll be running a Pecha Kucha on October 8th. It's going to be our first digital Pecha Kucha, so this should be pretty interesting. I do want to acknowledge and thank our sponsors. Really what we do is, I mean, we're all here kind of on a volunteer basis, but we really honor paying a respectable honorarium for our speakers for the quality of work that they have done and also for their time. And so, we are still honoring that part, even though the execution of this is all digital. So, all the sponsorship really does fund programming almost 100%. And so for those that have sponsored this year, thank you very much. And for those that bought tickets and season passes, every little bit does count. We're also rolling out kind of an interesting informal conversation called Recess. And this is a kind of a monthly thing spearheaded by Christine out of Juneau. It's to broaden the conversation of what matters recently for our community and specifically for design. Currently, the discussions are about how designers are working through kind of the COVID and sharing stories. These are rather informal. They're kind of fun. It's kind of like a happy hour thing. I would encourage you all to look at our Facebook page. We have the next one slated for September 10th at 6 p.m. We're also going to be rolling out a survey, and we want to just get feedback on what's working, what's not. This noon hour is a little bit new, and I'm really happy to see everyone here. So among other things, we have to adapt and be nimble with the changing kind of uncertainties of the world. So we're trying to stay tuned and get a good pulse with our audience. So please take the survey. And I know, I mean, I get so many survey emails and you guys are probably just gonna roll your eyes on this, but to incentivize it a little bit, I have a couple architecture books that are signed from previous speakers, and I am willing to donate 3 of them that I personally acquired so that they will be given out to the people that take the survey and the people that have bought season passes and memberships. Actually, I don't know if you guys can see my screen. That you can't buy these on Amazon. Signed. So yeah, let's just keep the organization going. It takes a community, you know, it takes a village to make things happen. I don't want to take too much more time unless anyone have anything specific. Feel free to contact me for anything. With that, maybe back to you, Garrett. Oh, I should mention Garrett will be kind of serving as our host. I think it's important to have this conversation that we're having, you know, with speakers all over the world, kind of dial it in for what it means for us. So each speaker will kind of have a host from the board that will be a liaison for this conversation. So with that, Garrett.
Right. Okay, thanks, Camus. So I do want to introduce our guest speaker today, Günther Vogt. He's a Liechtenstein-born landscape architect. He is the founder and principal of Vogt Landscape Architecture, which has offices in Zurich, London, Berlin, and Paris. He's also a professor for some 15 years at the ETH in Zurich. So he's one of those wonderful individuals that combines the profession with the academy. I'm sure students are very lucky. In 2012, Günther won the Prix Merit Oppenheim, prestigious prize named after the artist. He's the author of several books, including a recent book called The Landscape as a Cabinet of Curiosities, which I hope we'll have a little conversation about. So welcome, Mr. Vogt, to Alaska Design Forum. And Camus, if you could bring up those pictures. We typically have our guests here in Alaska, and you know he would be able to see South Central Alaska and Anchorage area, be able to see the interior in Fairbanks, and Southeast Alaska out of Juneau. So we really do wish you were here, and we sent a small care package to Günther. It's probably not arrived yet because international post, but the photos that are being shared are some things that we sent along to him. They're little artifacts and items from the different regions in the state that we all call home. And interestingly, when we thought of this idea, none of us had heard of Günther's own Cabinet of Curiosities, but it seems really, really appropriate in hindsight, and he can maybe tell us about that if it's part of what he wants to talk about. But part of his process is to collect artifacts, items, curiosities from his life and travels, and use those as inspirational material in his design work. So with that, I think I'll just turn it over to Günther, and you can share your screen, and thanks for being here. So we can see your screen, Günther.
You can see it?
We can, yes.
Cool.
So you want to pull up the slideshow that you had on the screen earlier?
Yes, I tried to do it again. Doesn't work.
Are the slides on the Zoom, or are they on your computer on a Keynote or PowerPoint?
No, I think I have to restart it again.
Here we are.
There we are. Ah, here we are.
Bravo.
So you can see it.
Yes, we can see. Everything looks good.
Okay, so let's start. So I had to reduce my slides because I had more than 200 or 300, and so I had to reduce it so it fits into 40 minutes. When I'm talking about nature of the city, it's a bit ambivalent, and I think we should really talk about landscape architecture in a different way. And I know I'm talking about landscape architecture from a European point of view, and that's very difficult if you're talking about the Anglo-Saxon, I would say Alaska is part of the Anglo-Saxon world, and that's really not so easy to talk about landscape architecture or nature in different culture. And I mean, what I mean is that in terms of architecture, you can work in every city. You can work in Hong Kong, in Berlin, Paris, New York, or Montreal, wherever. But in landscape architecture, it's very difficult. It's not only the different climate, it's a different culture. That's a really important thing, that we have to talk about culture in terms of landscape. Because it's a culture is really different. It's not only the climate, the different climate, it's really the different culture, which is interesting. And when I'm talking about landscape architecture, as you all know, everybody meanwhile, especially architects, are talking, we are in the Anthropocene and so on. I personally don't believe that we are in the Anthropocene. I think we already left the Anthropocene. And therefore, I would like to show you this small sketch by Gottfried Semper showing so this kind of house, his original house belonging to a really native culture, so where you have the roof and the walls and the ceiling, but the black dot in the middle is really the most important thing. It's controlling the fire in the house. And that was really, for me, it's the most important thing in terms of Anthropocene. So we could control the fire inside the house. And that's really the beginning of Anthropocene, starting thousands of years ago. But nowadays, I don't believe that we still have the control in terms of that we can talk about that we are living in the Anthropocene. I really believe that we lost this Anthropocene, that we are living in the Anthropocene age. And this is an image or a map of the 2019. It's not 2018, where we have had in Europe a super hot summer where nobody is talking about it. So for instance, in Paris, we lost about 6,000 elderly people because of the hot summer in the center of Paris. And again, this summer we had more than 45 degrees. And this is showing all the fires in 2019 all over the world. And I think this is showing we lost control about nature, especially about fire. And that's important to understand, that we lose control about landscape. And that's very important for me, that we really understand it. And this fire is one aspect, and the other one is water. This is showing, this map is showing, so on the left-hand side, you see Spain, in the middle, you have Italy, on the right-hand side, you have Turkey and Greece, and showing all the UNESCO protected cities around the Mediterranean. More than 100 of these protected cities will disappear in the next 50 years. This map is showing that all these cities or urban settlements will disappear within the next 50 years. And these are more than 50 cities around the Mediterranean area. And this is really important to understand, that we are really in a new age. And when we are talking about what does it mean, and here you see the Alpine region between France, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Slovenia. And you see you see it on the top down, the last 25 years, and how the glaciers disappeared. And it's quite strange. And I would like that you look at Venice, Venedig, on the top right. It wasn't an island, but 5,000 years ago, it became an island because of the disappearing of the glacier. And when you look at the glacier today, it's more or less disappeared. It's nothing, compared to the original stage. And when we are talking about this, I think it's very important that we discuss with all the different disciplines. Like here, a student, he's a former student of mine. I worked with him in Olafur Eliasson's studio, and he's showing a single person burning the glacier. And of course, it's impossible as a single person to destroy the glacier. But 8 billion people can make the glaciers disappearing. And therefore, it's a question of the Anthropocene, the ice, the water, and the heat. I think that's really a future in landscape architecture. And when we are talking in Switzerland or in Europe about landscape architecture, it's especially in this European context, it's very important to talk about types and typology. And there, Bernd and Hilla Becker from the art world showing these basic forms of water towers. And for us in the landscape architecture, it's really important to talk about different types. And of course, you can change all these types. It's not a static perception. And there is an example now from the UK showing an idea of landscape in a way, where it's a dance theater for Laban, for the Laban dance theater, where we were asked to create a kind of garden in front of this theater, and together with Herzog and de Meuron. And it was really a really specific place in London. It was heavily bombed by the Nazis in the Second World War. And we were not allowed to plant any tree, as you see it in this drawing, because of a special bird. So you would have crows attacking this little bird and so on. And we were only allowed to move the soil because of the contamination and so on. And we couldn't, we could only move it, and so let's say reshape it. And so we did it, and this is this little bird, where it's a black red start, where we were not allowed to plant trees because of these attacks of the crows. And this is not a rendering, this is really showing, it's a real photo showing the reality, what we built after some years of planning. So it's a kind of really artificial landscape and relating to the landscape outside in a way, in a formal way, but in a very artificial way. And of course, it's relating to the usage as a theater, and people can really sit on it, even if it's contaminated soil. And that's in the future a really discussion, this transformation of former industrial areas. What can we do in this case? It's possible to sit on it and on the lawn and so on. And it's a really specific approach to a landscape, let's say, and we are relating to a landscape outside. Then the next type, courtyard, a small hotel in Zurich, where I'm quite often asked, but what is it? And it's very easy, I'm saying it's just a birch forest. But you see in the middle ground, there is a drainage and there is loose gravel. It's not really a forest in a traditional way. It's a forest in a city, but we use this, let's say, this transformation of a landscape image or the landscape into a new type of urban landscape.
Ich sammle Momente, keine Likes. Ich bin Alpha, just Alpha.
And as you can see, it's it's really used as a stage for in this case for advertising. It was used, I would say, more than 100 times for a stage of an urban landscape. But it's in a way, in the end, it's very simple. It's just a birch forest, but in an urban condition. And that's really important to understand, that people see the image and react on this image. and it's not real. In reality, it's super. Of course, it's on a car parking area as everything. So when I said Switzerland it's a roof garden because we constantly have projects on the roof garden, and people don't accept it and don't understand it. But we are constantly working on roof gardens in Switzerland, especially in Switzerland. And so that's one aspect. And the next one, that the space, the public space, is somehow disappearing in the building. And there is one example for the football, International Federation of Football, and I'm talking just about this courtyard in the middle. That the FIFA Federation wanted to have all 5 continents. I mean, mirrored all 5 continents. It's very difficult because we don't have tropical and subtropical climate in Switzerland. But in a way, this is I would say in Alaska, it's your climate, so that it's open to the sky, but it's internal. That's really important. That the landscape and the former public space is more and more becoming an internal space. So we decided to show this rainforest, this northern rainforest. You have it in northwest of the US, Canada, and Alaska as well, of course. And we showed this type of landscape, but how can you show it? And so you see these really big trees out of concrete, of course. So these trunks are 3 meters wide, but people really believe, working inside, that it's natural, because they cannot go outside, they cannot go inside this courtyard, they cannot touch the trees. They really believe that this is nature, but it's only, in the end, it's really super artificial. But people really working inside, they really believe it's natural. And meanwhile, the mosses are growing on it. And so it's really and we are not really interested in the difference between natural and cultural aspects. And of course, as you can see it here, it's super artificial, and that's the forest just nearby with all these artificial trees. And it's not really, for us, it's not really interesting, the dialectic between natural and cultural things. We are more interested to create a kind of image which is talking about nature. And so if it's real or fake, it's not so interesting for us. And then the park. So it's a park in Basel. We are showing Basel is the main landscape element is the River Rhine. And we did a long, I cannot show everything, we could publish a book about it. So we did a long analysis, what is the landscape in the city of Basel, what is, let's say, the water sign or the invisible landscape of this city today. And we found out there are different terraces and the River Rhine itself, and of course the pebble I showed before, they are all coming from Switzerland from different geological situations. So you have a lot of different small stones or pebbles in this river. And they are all talking about the landscape of Basel. And there we decided to build a kind of embankment, really an artificial embankment. And as you can see, it's quite, the guy in the back is like an archaeologist. working on it, and this guy in front is a really heavy builder building it. And that's in a way, it's a way we are working with. And of course you can say it's fake, but in reality, people believe what you are doing. And I'm not talking about the vegetations, different forests we are proposing, but in the end, as you can see in the section, it's all on a very artificial surface. It means it's on a car parking area, 2 stories, and we have more than 3-4 meters of soil on top of it. It's quite expensive, you can believe it. And people are walking down to the River Rhine on the right-hand side, and they really believe they're walking down, but in reality, it's completely flat. Well, these are these embankments, and it looks like nature, but it's not really nature. So these are the different layers, of course, of the different embankments. And for if any students is listening now, believe me, you cannot build it outside of Switzerland. It's really, the walls are up to 3.5 meters. And I mean, even European regulations are completely against it. But in Switzerland, the health and safety people told me, yeah, if you don't use lawn, if you use meadows, people will see it can become dangerous. And Switzerland is a dangerous country. People should learn that the landscape is dangerous, no? And then you can build it. It's believe me, even in Europe, it's just impossible to build such a, without any handrail, fences and so. It's just, this is an exception in Switzerland. And if you see any architectural projects in Switzerland and you find it great, you don't see that we don't have these regulations like in any other countries in Europe. And that's quite important, I think, to understand that we don't have this kind of regulations in relation to landscape. So can you imagine that somebody is telling you, instead of lawn, you have prairies and so on, and then people should understand it's dangerous. If you see a prairie instead of lawn, it's becoming dangerous and you should be careful. I don't think that in any other country you can have it. But in the end, what you see, it's on the top of a car parking garage. It's super artificial, but it looks super natural. And of course, then again, here we are on top of a car parking, and you see the trees, and so it's very, very difficult to explain. So that Switzerland itself is a very artificial landscape on one hand, and on the other hand, it's a very, very natural landscape. I mean, the mountains and the landscape in Switzerland is super natural, but our landscape architecture is super artificial. So I will show you now 3 projects from the office. And Sarah, I would like to discuss, and perhaps we have time to discuss it. I don't know how it is in Alaska, but in Europe we have, how can I explain it? My colleagues constantly complain, I mean the landscape architects, that we are not respected at all. We in our office, we have the problem, we are respected too much sometimes. And I'm showing you now a project in Milan, in Hamburg, and in Zurich. And one is in Milan. So when you know, looking at Milan, you see that you have many urban development. They are not really good. And the city of Milan said, but we do have an urban planning competition, and then an architectural competition for every individual building. And in the end, we have a kind of competition for the leftover landscape. Let's turn it around. That means we are not interested in urban planning building. We are not interested in building, but finally we want to do an urban development. But let's start with the landscape. So that was the brief of the competition. And here you see the green on the top, rectangular on the top, and the blue on, further down. There were two sides, not connected at all, and but belonging to the same owner of the land. That means the Italian railway company. And this plan was really published in all Italian newspapers. In the future, we have to discuss about the blue Milan in the south and the green Milan in the north. That means the blue is wet, so where the Po and all the rivers are, and the green is around 10 meters above this wet landscape. It's dry. And it was really published in all newspapers, and it was really related to our concept. It was together with OMA and with Rem Koolhaas. They really asked us one side, the blue one, 100% green space. And the other one, 60% green space, and the rest, 40%, has to be 30% green space. So we did a lot of research, and I can't show everything. On the left-hand side, it's Leonardo da Vinci did a kind of channel, a canal, like a kind of harbor, an urban harbor in Milan, relating to the outside. And we related to this historical thing of Leonardo da Vinci, and on the other hand, the very early airport in Milan. You can see on the top right, it's a traditional airport, but in the beginning it was an airport for planes landing on water, and so that was our reference somehow to deal with it. And we proposed, besides the Leonardo da Vinci channel on the right-hand side, we proposed a new, much bigger channel just for as a park, you know. So they asked for 100% green. The building, by the way, in the middle is a leftover building by Aldo Rossi, but we proposed to deal with it. And in reality, we had to solve many problems. I mean, contamination of the air, soil, water, everything is completely contaminated. And by the way, if you see the maps of Milan and Bergamo was really the epicenter of Corona, and Milan as well. And you see the air quality and the COVID patients in the hospital, it's similar on the map. So that means that the air quality has to do with COVID as well. And it's very difficult to say what is the relation between the two. But for us, it was really important that we have to deal with this contamination of air, water, and soil. And the other one was extremely dry. And of course, in the end, the architect, you see it on the left-hand side, had to build some buildings or to show some urban investments in a way. But along these existing railway lines, it was a very dry landscape. It wasn't far away from it, from this wet landscape, but it's 10 meters higher. So it's extremely dry compared with the south. And then that was for us really important to show that we have to deal with a larger landscape, with a larger relationship to the landscape. And the next project in Hamburg, so we still believe in the memory of a city. In Hamburg, for instance, it's so-called Volkspark, the park for the public, the community. 100 years ago, it was a very simple type of park, very simple. So you define the edge, and in the middle, it's completely free for all usage. And we really believe that there is a memory of a city like Hamburg, that people really know their tradition. And these are some of these park types in Hamburg. And our proposal was really to Hamburg here in Europe, you see in Northern Europe. And and our project was about the transformation of a harbor. And when I'm talking about Milan, here again, the city of Hamburg said the problem is the landscape architecture, and not that the landscape architects are the problem. So they invited 6 landscape architects and 6 urban planners and architects to propose something for this transformation of an existing harbor. And we, as landscape architects, we had to deliver everything. In the first phase, I mean the urban planning, all the buildings, the parks, the public spaces, as the architects as well had to deliver everything. And afterwards, they reduced the 6 and 6 into 3 and 3. And then they combined different offices, landscape architects together with architects, without asking us. They didn't ask us. So we were combined happily with Herzog and de Meuron, and to join and to do a proposal, to work on a proposal for the master plan of this area. And this is really new, and I think my colleagues, the landscape architects, are constantly complaining that they are not respected. We have the opposite problems, that we are asked too early sometimes, and like in this case, where we had to deliver an urban planning concept. And I only have 1 urban planning person in my office. So we did it, and I think it wasn't on a good level, but in a way, that's the future. And I believe that this problem of landscape architecture, that in the future, the cities will ask more for urban development. What is the intention of the landscape architect? Like, besides Milan, that's the second example, that we are asked very early to propose something. And, and of course, you can imagine it looks like this. It's a typical harbor situation, and this is our proposal for the harbor, and of course a lot of urban development, and how to design all these edges to the harbor, to the water side, and with more natural and more urban related, and we constantly always we build it in a model, in models, different models. So for instance, our client came from Hamburg to Zurich to see all our models, because we are constantly working in these analog models, and they really want, because they only saw this kind of photos, and they wanted to see the real model, and I think that's really an advantage. And that's the final proposal. And what's really new for us, so we proposed in the middle of this development a park, and all the housing and office buildings on the edge. And what you see in the middle is an existing it's an existing roof. You know, normally you have today in a harbor, you have containers and so on. But in the old days, you had this kind of roofs where you could store all the goods and so on. And it's 500 meters long and 40 meters wide. And we propose to keep this roof in addition to the park. So that's a kind of, it's a new type of park. So you have a park and you have a roof with completely open on all sides, but it's, where you can have sports activities and all the different things under a roof. And it's really a large thing. And that was really a proposal to have a park and a covered park. So that was really, again, going back where public space is more and more related to buildings nowadays. And in the center, there is a supernatural harbor, and we propose to protect it. And you see it here with all these infrastructures, the high-rise building and so on. We really wanted to keep this natural reserve in the middle. In the center, there is really nature and not a park. It's really nature. And so to have this kind of discussion, what is nature, what is a city, and the top right, the roof and the park on the other side. So to have a kind of new definition, what can public space be? And you see it here in the middle, the roof and the park and all the buildings and this natural reserve in the middle. And I think it's for us really important to discuss nature and urbanization in a different way. So it can be really side by side. It's not such a discussion what really is nature. And I think it doesn't have to be normally in a park. It can be part of it, and you even don't see it. And the last one, a very small project in Zurich. On the left-hand side, you see a little plaza. It was a car parking space before we transformed it into a normal public or urban plaza without car parking. And of course, there is a church. You see the shadow. It's like a clock a bit. And this transformation of a car parking into a normal plaza for people, you see it on the right-hand side, is not so easy. And you see it here at night time. That's somehow really difficult, meanwhile, in Europe, especially in Europe, because people are saying, or the government is saying, these plazas are too big. But I think that as landscape architects in the future, we really have to have a new rule or a new position. Like in this case, where we show this is an installation of this plaza in summertime by an artist, or here is an installation in another summer with urban gardening, that we are somehow responsible to be a kind of curator in the future, like in a museum. I think we cannot design and build public places. We are really responsible more and more to be curator. What can happen on such a public space? Because we are creating huge public spaces and in the end, all the people are saying, yeah, but it's empty the rest of the year and so on. And so we are asked as curator to deal with these public spaces. I don't think, of course, it's nice to to have this public space in a way. It's a nice feature, but in the end, what you see here, it's just the design to get rainwater. How is the rainwater disappearing here? That's the question here of the design, nothing else. But in the end, it's really empty for the rest of the year. And then you need a kind of curator who is telling the government how to deal with it. And that's really, I think that's really important. And now coming back, I don't know how it is for you, but in Alaska, you have a lot of nature. But in Europe, everybody is asking me, what is really the landscape you like most? What is the most beautiful landscape? And then it's becoming very difficult because I have to say, that's it. That's a landscape where we are excluded. This is really Chernobyl, a former city, overgrown by forests, by vegetation. There, it's the most beautiful landscape is really there, where we are excluded. And so we have really to think about, do we really want to be excluded? I mean, of course, you can say wild horses coming back to Chernobyl and other animals and wild nature and everything. But of course, you see the sign in front. What does it mean? Are we really excluded of nature? Are we really no longer part of the landscape? And that's a real question to us. And I mean, I could show you an example. I was 2 years ago in Białowież. It's in northern Poland, close to Belarus. A beautiful landscape, and like Simon Schama is describing it as a medieval landscape, but it's only beautiful because of the Polish king and the Russian Tsars they're hunting there. So the people living around this forest, they're not allowed to hunt, to cut a tree and so on. So you have trees about 600 years old, you have all the wild animals. It's a beautiful landscape, but it was protected by an aristocratic system. So, but nowadays we have this kind of landscape where we are excluded because of this nuclear or atomic outfall. So we are just excluded. And in a way, the most beautiful landscapes, or paradise, if you want to know it or say it like that, paradise is where we are excluded. And that's a bit a problem. And I think we should get paradise back. Thank you.
Thank you, Günther. Yeah, maybe to kick this off, I would just echo what you said, which is that in Alaska, where we are, we have a more, I would say our urban environments have a frontier relationship to the land because they're very recently developed. And we're not building our urban environment on top of previous human development construction versus older European cities where there's this layering of urbanism upon urbanism. And I get a kind of vision from what you're showing us of a new kind of landscape layer that gets added on top of the city versus the relationship that we have here where the city is sort of adjacent to nature. And I guess in the spirit of our lecture series of Revised Utopias, maybe the open question is a city with a quasi-natural overlay or a constructed landscape overlay a really attractive vision for the future of human habitation? Or do we have a choice?
I think that's a very difficult question. So it's, I mean, one problem is that people don't accept reality. And I'm talking in Switzerland, let's say, about reality, landscape, for instance. People don't accept it. And I think you have this problem all over the world, that people don't read the landscape as it is. Just, it can be an artificial landscape on a car parking level and so. When I mentioned once in Switzerland that Switzerland is a roof garden, and everybody was really, really against me. And then I said, okay, let's say Switzerland is an industrial area. And again, everybody was against me. What do you mean? And I said, this agricultural production is completely industrial. And it's not nice in reality. And then people agree if you explain it. But if you come to a really clear expression what it means, people don't want to be in such a landscape, or they don't like it to be positioned in such a landscape, and that's a real problem.
I want to open it up for questions, but I do have another quick question that's a little more prosaic, which is about what you said about Switzerland and the rules. So I understand the idea that you would have a culture where there's a higher risk tolerance, and you wouldn't overregulate the safety of the built environment. Mm-hmm. But it seems like you also probably deal with lots of regulations. In our city, you would never have an extensive park built on top of a parking garage, just because there would be so many. That would be the last thing you do because of the cost of it, and mm-hmm. So the constraints are so different. And are those regulated, or is that just a necessity? Would a city build a park on top of a parking garage because they have to? Or is it just a pharmaceutical company that has lots and lots of money that does it because they want to?
Yeah, I would say it was really the money of a pharmaceutical company, but in the real end, for instance, all over Europe, everybody's now talking about sustainability, ecology, and so on. But in Switzerland, for instance, we have a rule for the last 30 years that every flat roof has to be green. Mm. And that's really, especially, for instance, in Zurich, we have 4 degrees less temperature in summertime than 30 years ago. It's just because all the flat roofs are green. And this is it's a legal rule. It's not a design decision. And I think that's really important, that we do have this kind of rules. And of course, it's not very expensive. It's an extensive flat roof. But I think this is now becoming more and more important. When I mentioned this example from Paris, where elderly people 2 years ago died, 6,000 people died. And this summer again, we had 45 degrees. And when I showed a map of Paris to the students in Milan, for instance, they really asked me, but what do you mean? What it means? And then I showed a map of Paris, where you had this medieval town with, we all like it as a tourist, with these narrow streets and so on. And then Haussmann arrived. He built all this boulevard, but it was more to control the the culture, the citizens in the end. It was really a control instrument, these boulevards. But nowadays, we would have to cut in really green corridors to bring fresh air into the city center of Paris. But by the way, that would mean no trees, because the trees would be difficult, because they would be against the fresh air and the wind and so on coming in. And the meadows are more efficient than forests, let's say, for cold air. So the production of cold, fresh air is more efficient on top of meadows than on top of forests. That would mean that you would have new corridors bringing fresh air into the city center of Paris. And I would say in the future, say we really have to cut in, like Haussmann, new alleys and a new system. And we will have it, especially in the Mediterranean cities, that we need. I mean, you can look at all these mineral plazas in the Mediterranean cities like Siena, a beautiful city with a beautiful plaza, no green, no trees, and it's just too hot. And that would mean that we have to transform a culture. It's not only because of the climate, but it would mean that we change the culture of, let's say, the Mediterranean urban idea. And that will be a real problem in the future.
That's a big challenge, yeah. Thousand years of culture.
Yeah.
I think James has a question. I don't know if I can unmute you, or you can. There you are.
Yeah, I just did. Hello there, Günther. James Bibb in Juneau, and I want to just, as far as what Alaska's doing, at least in Southeast here, Corpus Design, I'll do a little plug for their efforts. Over the years, they started planting trees in our downtown core, which is, Juneau's a 35,000, but it has a pretty strong urban kind of, it's been built up in the 70s and 80s through growth, and it's a lot of concrete. And what they've done over the last 20, 30 years has just been phenomenal. It's been behind the scenes. And it really reiterated, and I love the idea of landscape architects and their role. There was a Doug Macy of Walker Macy out of Portland came into Juneau about 6 to 8 years ago, and we did an urban study. And what we've been blinded here locally with talking about waterfront parks and walkways, he quickly realized that what we've done is disconnected our mountains to the water, which is sort of the old cultural identity that we are connected to the water. And that could either be our Tlingit culture or our Norwegian heritage and some of the Western expansion. And it was profound the way he took a green marker and a couple of pens and just dragged the mountain back through the city, contrary to all these ring roadways, and said we have to pull the landscape through to make it whole again. So there's been some really great discussions, and I think it's been landscape architects that have led a lot of that planning effort. So just to give you an update on some things in Alaska here. Thank you.
Yeah, but you know, I think so. For instance, when I showed really a map about Paris, there you have to cut in, and then everybody was really upset. And then I said, but in the old days, they really destroyed more than 20,000 buildings to cut in these Haussmannian alleys. More than 20,000 buildings. And that's the future. And that's not easy to accept. That's really the future. We have to cut in, and no longer because of urbanization, it's relating to landscape and to city, so climate, whatever. And that's really, that's a new scale we have to think about. I mean, Haussmann destroyed more than 20,000 buildings to build his alleys and his promenade. And we have to do the same to, I mean, I have an office in the center of Paris. I mean, 45 degrees, you can, without, you have in the Northern American society, you have climate machines to regulate the climate. We don't have it in Europe. They are not allowed. How can we deal with this? I mean, in terms of energy, and it's, if it has to be natural, then it has to be quite strict, and the scale is completely new. That's really what we expect, especially in the Mediterranean area in Europe, that we have to accept a new scale, which is not, we are not used to it. And I mean, 200 years ago it was normal, but nowadays it's very difficult to accept that we have to accept a new scale of intervention. Because the new mayor of Paris, she said, for instance, you know, you have a Parisian boulevard coffee or restaurant protected with a little plastic wall, whatever. And she is saying nowadays it's not allowed, so next winter, it's not allowed that you have electrical heating, you know, this kind of mushrooms inside. Can you imagine there are thousands of these heaters in Paris, all these boulevard cafes and so, they all have it. It's completely forbidden. It will change the urban culture completely. And of course I agree, but it will change the culture completely, the urban culture. And we have to accept it in a way. And we have to find new ways how to deal with it. And yeah,
I was just noticing in our city, because we've had no dine-in because of COVID, the restaurants are quickly adapting, and they're closing off lanes of traffic, and they're putting out these heaters and tents. And one of our questions from the chat is just asking, what response do landscape architects potentially have to COVID and the shift in social patterns due to the pandemic? I think that's one example in the urban planning, perhaps. Have you been talking with your students a lot about that?
Yes, but we just hand over a competition in St. Petersburg in Russia, as I really asked whether we could provide something, you know, 2 meters distance for COVID, that all the benches have to have fences around the bench. And so, but I say, but listen, the next pandemic will 3 meters, and then we have to change the system. I mean, I think we shouldn't follow all these, finally, it will change in the future as well. And I think we shouldn't change park design or public space design in the future, because it will always change. And I think it will stay as it is. And of course, there are temporary installation and all these things. But in reality, I mean, I don't see that we should change anything. Do you really believe that we will have another pandemic with 1.5 meter distance, and so that we should relate to this regulation? I think, I mean, I don't know whether you respect it. I have to wear a mask in the public transport in Switzerland. I accept it and I do it. I don't have a problem, but in the design of the public spaces, I don't think we should react on it now.
It seems a little hasty to redesign the environments around one event. But what you're talking about previously about the Haussmannian avenues and the, you know, the remaking of cities around a climate change regime. I think that's an inevitability.
Yeah, but it's a completely other scale. I mean, and that's really the problem that people have to accept. We have to react on a completely different scale. And I have to say, landscape architects are constantly complaining that they are not respected and so on. But in reality, my impression is that society is really asking on landscape architect what could be a solution. And I mean, if you have this climate question in cities, in dense cities, we are really asked, and we have to tell the story, and the story means we have to change a lot and on another scale. It's not possible to do pocket parks and all these kind of small things. It has to be much bigger. And then that's really difficult to explain if it's related to urban climate. It has to be on a much bigger scale. It's like in Berlin, where you have this airfield of Tempelhof, this former airport. This is really, it's 300 hectares of meadow. And this is really producing cold air for the city. It's not the forests around the city of Berlin. It's really this central airport producing cold air. And of course, you can now say, everybody's telling me, yeah, but it's a former airport and so on. But we should not build there. That's what we propose, because you need it for the cold air production. You cannot build there, and finally they respected it, and that they don't build there because it's a bit, how can I say, it's a bit perverse. So that on this airfield there is a lot of cold air produced, and the cold air is transported into the city center of Berlin through the motorways. A bit lower than this airfield, so 4 or 5 meters lower. But it's in the summertime, the cold air is transported through the motorways into the city center. It's a bit perverse. Wow. It's reality.
It's an air conditioning system.
It's a kind of air conditioning, but it's really strange, but it's reality. And you have to respect reality somehow, and you have to respect all these data you get from all the mapping system, and yeah, it's
yeah. So yeah, we have a problem with respecting reality in the United States, but that's another conversation. Amanda has a question. You want to speak it, or you want me to read it?
Sure, I can speak it. It'll take me a little bit to articulate well. Grüezi Günther und willkommen in unserer virtual in Alaska. Let's see, I was just thinking about really being a user of the spaces that you landscape architects design. I can show my screen if you like, Garrett. Okay. So I was thinking primarily of our museum, which unfortunately, let's see, I might have to do something in my system preferences to do that. Okay, I'll have to pause it for a moment. So when there's a design put in by the landscape architects and all the work that you put into it, and then the design team leaves, how that space changes over time and whether or not it's maintained or not, or with different administrations, what happens to those organic materials is always really interesting to me. I never know, sometimes I have a very visceral reaction to a space as it changes over time, and wondering about what I should do with that reaction, like a space that might have been comfortable to me if over time, if things change and it isn't anymore, is that something that I should, you know, tell the city about? Or is that something that is just a new space for me to learn how to be in again? I'm not sure if that makes much sense, but I think perhaps, yeah, some of my friends could articulate that a bit more.
If I could try, I think what you're asking is, when you see some of our public open spaces or park spaces transforming in a different direction than you think they should be, or that you remember them being, what's your role in the community to do something about that? Or do you just need to adapt with it? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, really, how do you gauge, I guess as a landscape architect, how do you gauge where you would want to come back into a space and ask for changes to that, to how that change has happened? Yeah, I have one follow-up question after that, if we go with that for a little bit.
Now, I have to explain you the Swiss system. No? So, Switzerland is the most democratic society on the world. That means if we win a competition, for instance, for a public space, for a symmetry, whatever, in the end, we are working on it and so on. And then finally, we have to go to a public vote. So the public, the society is voting whether they agree or they don't agree. If they don't agree, it's dead. No, I mean, so that means you need contact with the public. That's super important, and it's really special. I mean, the rest of Europe is not like that, but Switzerland is super special in this sense. So the Swiss people are voting whether you like to have a military defense, and then you have 20% saying, no, we don't need it, nothing happens. If you have the secrecy of the bank account, you have 37%. That means it has to change. So that means people don't accept it's a majority, not the majority, but I would say 30% of the people don't like this system. So it has to change. It's not 51 against 49. It's really, and we have a vote. So just today I got, I don't know, 15 different votes for a new schoolhouse and so on. And then everything is going to a public vote. And it's extremely, extremely democratic. It's really not, and we are part of this system. And by the way, all these famous Swiss architects are part of this system. You can win a competition for a schoolhouse or public house, whatever, but in the end, you have to go through a public vote. You have to have arguments, why is it like that? And you have to argue really to explain why is it concrete and we don't like concrete and so on. And if you fail, then it's done. It's dead. You will never build it. And there, it's really an open discussion constantly, and that's important. And so we are, for instance, doing constantly for our projects interviews with people living around these public spaces, and so we exactly know what these people expect in such a public space. We don't have to agree always, but we exactly know what is the demand for this public space. And I think that's really special in Switzerland. The rest of Europe is not like that. It's really, that's why Switzerland is not part of Europe. It's an island in the middle of Europe. And the Swiss people have a problem that they believe that Europe is not really democratic in a Swiss sense, not democratic. Of course it's democratic, but not for Swiss people. Because they have these public votes. can always vote for every decision. It's not the politicians are deciding, but the citizens is deciding. And that's really a different system. And for us, it's absolutely normal to have this kind of discussion. And you can design everything, it's beautiful, and the jury is saying it's beautiful and so on. But in the end, the public vote will decide whether it will be built or not. And therefore, you have to know all these demands, what the society is asking for. And you have to be very close to it, otherwise it will fail. It's just impossible. Even people like Zumthor or Herzog and de Meuron, they're coming out of this society, and they really understand how it works. And it's not easy to explain it. I mean, because in your case, it's much easier. So you have a decision that you build this or this building, and then it will be built. But in Switzerland, you have to go through a public vote, and that means it can fail. Why ever? And so you didn't respect anything or a special thing or a detail, and so you have to be very close to the citizens, and the government have to deal with it and to provide you with all this information. What is really the need of the society? I think it's a very good system.
So we have, I think we have time for one more question. We have a question from Hussein. If you want to go ahead and come off mute, you can ask your question.
My question was, speaking of the special status of Switzerland, in India we have a problem of a very large population, and we don't have the governing systems, administrative systems are way behind Switzerland. So what could be an immediate solution for bringing the nature back to our urban centers? Because the population is very large, and the land areas are shrinking. The natural land is shrinking. Naturally built land areas are shrinking every day.
I think it's always the question, what do you mean with nature? Bringing back the nature. What is nature? No? I think we, at least in Europe, we cannot talk about nature anymore. Because even if you look at this image in Chernobyl, this is not really nature. It's a second-hand nature, because it's only existing because of this nuclear fallout of Chernobyl. We are not really able to talk about nature in the city anymore, but we can talk about the image or second-hand nature, whatever you want, and to have this impression of nature. But I don't think that we can really create nature anymore, at least in Europe. I don't see, I mean, after the Waldsterben, where the forests were dying in Europe in the late, I was as a student manifesting on the street against this forest dying, and we were all asked that in 2020 we will have 50% less forests than in the late 80s. In reality, we have 50% more forests. That has to do with 1989, where after the wall was destroyed, and they didn't produce, especially in Poland, this acid rain stopped in Western Europe, and so we didn't have these dying forests anymore. And now with the abandonment of the landscape and so on, we have more than 50% more forests than we had 30 years ago. And it's very difficult to say, how can you create new nature? And I would say, we have to accept that the nature in the future will be completely different than the nature we have today. Or like this image you see on the screen. The question, what is really nature, I think will be completely different in the future. And I'm not saying that it's not as good as it was in the past, but it's completely different, what we call nature. And it's very difficult to say how can we propose in the future new, I would say public spaces are very important in the future. It's not a question whether it's more nature or less nature, but public spaces, whatever public, or what quality public spaces ever have in the future. And for instance, what we see, what I mentioned before in my lecture, it's that public space is more and more part of the building. So especially if you have a kind of plaza or square or whatever, it's more and more like in the Tate we did with Herzog and de Meuron. The plaza is inside the building. It's partly outside the building, but mainly it's inside the building. And we really have to think, there is a public space. And then the question is, what is a public space? So do you have, so for instance, my definition, you have to find your own definition, but my definition for a public space, for instance, is it's accessible 24 hours a day, no CCTV cameras, and you have drinking water for free and on a very good level, drinking water, and seating for free. If you would have all these 5 criteria worldwide, believe me, you would change the world. And the criteria are very simple. And if you think about it, and this is really important. I mean, can you imagine in Africa, you would have drinking water in a very good quality for free. This is amazing. If you would have no CCTV cameras in some countries of this world, it would be paradise. If you really combine all these criteria for a public space, I think this is more important than the question of nature or less nature. What are really the conditions of a public space?
Well, that's a great parting question and thought. I think we're out of time, but I want to thank you again, Günther Vogt, and thank everybody for tuning in for the quarantine edition of Alaska Design Forum. Let's keep the conversations going. So thanks, Günther. Take care. Have a good rest tonight.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Günther.
Thank you.
Thank you.